So I'm going to get started just because we want to make sure we get through all the good stuff. So hi, everyone. My name's Angie, if I haven't already introduced myself, and I am one of the team members who run the New Ventures BC competition presented by Innovate BC. So we are continuing our education topics for our startup seminar series, and we're covering PR 101 today. And looking forward to it. So before we get into it, just a reminder, New Ventures BC, we're a not-for-profit. We're here to help early stage tech companies, of course, through the competition, but also through our accelerator, our sales accelerator, and we have a free online market validation training program. I would tell you to go sign up for that today if you're trying to validate your idea, but we're about to launch a brand new 2.0 version. So, and that'll happen next week. So stay tuned for that. Also, just a few kind of community announcements here and there for some of our many great partners. A couple of events you can see there coming up. It's quieting down for sure because it's summer. Also, Liz, if you can just put the survey link in there. We're just doing that on behalf of our friends at Venture Labs. I think they've noticed there's a bit of a gap in the marketplace for supporting life science and health tech ventures specifically. They feel, and I think I tend to agree with them, but they want to do their customer discovery as well. So if you have 10 minutes to complete a survey for them, that'll help them make sure they're developing a program that's actually useful to you. And our other friends at Entrepreneurship UBC, they are intaking for a couple of their programs. So again, feel free to look them up, and those are the deadlines. All right, I'm going to thank our sponsors and then we'll get going. So our lead and title sponsor, Innovate BC. Gold sponsors, EY, Fasken, SFU BD School of Business, and the UBC Sutter School of Business. Silver sponsors, TELUS Ventures, Output, Ventec, Angel Network, and Volition. And our many bronze and media sponsors are listed here. I will point, of course, specifically to Switchboard PR today because Kathleen Reid is here. She's the founder of Switchboard PR, and you know, if you've been part of Vancouver Startup Week, if you've attended the TIAs or read about the TIAs from BC Tech Association, then you're already familiar with Switchboard PR because I know they're involved with them and us this year. So we're really pleased to have Kathleen and her team be a sponsor with us today. So if you need to reach us, this is us. Otherwise, I'm going to stop sharing so Kathleen can get sharing her screen. And yeah, we're going to cover PR 101. I've got us going till 2. If for some reason there's tons of questions, we can stay over a little bit, but we'll try to get all the most important stuff done by 2 o'clock. So over to you, Kathleen, and thanks again for being here.
Awesome. Oh, sorry about that. Can everyone hear me okay? Yeah?
I can hear you. Yep.
I'm just going to drag so I can see all your lovely faces on the side. Awesome. Really excited to be here. Angie, thanks for the introduction. We'll walk through again. If we've got questions, feel free to jump in anytime with questions if they come up. We're not using a ton of jargon, but if something doesn't make sense to you or it's not landing, you know, jump up because someone likely has a similar question. So just a bit of housekeeping, make sure you're on mute unless you've got a question. And yeah, do ask questions throughout. You can either use chat and no problem if you've got one and you want to jump in. Who we are. So Switchboard, we're a full service PR agency headquartered in Vancouver, Canada. We work with tech companies from various stages. So when they're in their startup stage, when they're growing and scaling, and then we work with some of the wonderful anchor companies in our ecosystem here in BC. We have clients across North America. We specialize in issues management, crisis support, and media relations. So we're going to talk about a lot of great things in the PR landscape today and what you can do for your company to lock in some PR opportunities. Here's an example of a few of our clients. In terms of our agenda, we'll work to keep this in the hour. And if people want to workshop media training or have questions for me, I do have the 90 minutes held in my calendar, so happy to support. Before we dive in, I find it really important to set an objective whenever we're in a session like this, especially all working, you know, in various startups and growing and scaling companies. It's time out of your day, so I want to make sure you get what you need out of this session. So just write down why you were here and what you really want to take away from this session. That's going to be important. So I'll give you a couple seconds to do that. And I'll share my objective with you as well. of what I'm hoping that all of you can get out of this session. So I'll give you a second. I know some of you are driving, so no problem there. Do not stop your car to write something down, but just make sure you're mentally thinking, what's your objective and what are you really looking to get out of today? So I want to make sure that you're leaving with at least one of these tools today. I want to make sure you're either able to ensure your communications efforts count so that they're not for nothing. And, we've talked through maybe some of the challenges that you're having with them. I want to make sure you're able to get your messages in front of the right audience. And I want you to leave with the tools to create buzz and troubleshoot along the way. So we'll talk about what some of that troubleshooting looks like as well. So let's start with what is public relations. Everyone has different definitions of what public relations is, but at the core, it's really your engagement of relationships between an organization and its diverse publics. So these are, your stakeholders who matters. This could be investors. It could be your employees. Obviously, talent and retention is a big one. It could be members of government, different government groups. So those are kind of your diverse publics or your stakeholders. And it's really through the use of communications tools to achieve a mutual understanding and realize the organization's goals and serve the public interest. So that's a very technical definition of PR from the Canadian Public Relations Society. I like to think about it as one of the most important things for an organization to have during startup and growth phases. This with your stakeholders is building up the bank of goodwill. It's helping you secure investment. It's really critical, and we can talk about why it is throughout this session. I think often PR only gets attention when it's too late. So sometimes in a crisis situation, or we've got a news release, we've raised $2 million, we want to put it out and get media's attention. It's really important for the media that you're having multiple touch points and creating some of those relationships before there's an ask. So often that ask comes and people come to us and say, we've got this really incredible announcement. Sometimes that can work, but other times you've got to do some building before you get to the announcement period. So we'll talk about what that looks like for various stages. So obviously there's different stages of a startup. You may be at any of these stages, and we've helped companies along the way. So when we kind of workshop some of the media training, let me know what stage you're at, what you do, and we can role play some media training scenarios in this session as well. So whoever's brave enough and wants to workshop one, I'll role play reporter and we'll ask you some questions about your company. So within PR, there's lots of different tactics that we use. One that we're going to talk about quite a bit today is media relations. So let's talk about what media relations is. Media relations is really the relationships between yourself and media publications. And media publications, there's lots of them, right? There's mainstream media, thinking of folks like the Globe and Mail. There's trade publications, right? There's business trade publications, there's tech trade publications, and there even are trade publications within tech, right? There's artificial intelligence specific publications that exist out there. So we'll talk about how this works and how you can get your story in them. I think one of the things that's really important to think about during your media relations efforts are that reporters need you and you need them, and it's very much a two-way relationship. So let's dive into why PR is important generally, and you'll see that this goes into media relations as a tactic. So public relations is important because it's helping you tell a story, right? Stakeholders are always forming opinions of your company. So you want to make sure that you're able to shape that story. And within PR, we often talk about your external audiences, so outside of the company, and your internal audiences within the company. So that's something that you may be thinking about with your colleagues right now. The other thing that is important for public relations is that it really helps you build your relationships with any of your stakeholders. So we chatted about who some of those stakeholders may be, whether it's building your relationships with the media or building your relationships with government. Those are all really important. Key stakeholders are always forming these opinions, and they're forming them based on different things that they're reading, right? So it may be from a media report. It may be from something that they've seen on Reddit. It may be from a tweet that they saw. So you want to make sure when your stakeholders and your key audiences are forming opinions based on you, they're educated, they've got lots to work with. PR is really important because it helps you build and protect your organization's reputation in good times, but also in bad times. So you want to make sure that you're building up that bank of goodwill. We talk about this a lot at Switchboard. It's building up that bank of goodwill in the good times and the bad. And often when you've done really proactive PR, if you're in a spot that may be a little tricky, you've got dissatisfied customers, or you've had something happen, you're able to use that goodwill to get through it a little bit easier. So if you think of Chipotle, the food company, the fast food company, or I guess it's kind of like healthier fast food, they had an E. coli scandal. And with their E. coli scandal, they really built great PR efforts in advance. So when they were talking to their customers, it wasn't something that really impacted their performance much. If you look at kind of the social around that, people were coming to their backs and saying, you know, we support this organization, we support this restaurant, they're doing everything they can. So that's an example where you're just seeing the goodwill, the media relationships, building goodwill with stakeholders and customers on social in advance. The other thing that PR does is it helps with your third-party validators building that credibility. I'm just going to close my window because for some reason there's a construction truck across the street from my house right now. But it really helps you build that credibility. So if someone like Sean Silkoff at the Globe and Mail, or Josh O'Kane, who I believe is still on sabbatical at the Globe, start to write about your company, it's going to generate more attention, right? It's got someone who's credible, who's writing about tech companies regularly. They're saying, hey, this is a company to watch or something to look at. BetaKit does a roundup of where people have raised funding. Maybe you're on there. Investors may say, oh, this is a company I want to check out. So that's important. It's validation. Government could validate as well. You may have an investor validate with some of your PR. These are all reasons that PR is important. So is everyone kind of understanding that so far? Happy to pause if anyone does have questions. We're good? Okay, let's talk about the media landscape, and we'll talk about it from a Canada perspective, and I'll elaborate a little bit on what it looks like in the US and some of the trends that we're seeing. This isn't completely up to date, but it gives you a good sense in terms of Canada, what the media landscape looks like. So really in Canada, it's interesting because you'll see telecom, it plays a big role in our media landscape and who you can pitch. Things to note with the media landscape in Canada, that being first still matters. So you can offer media something called an exclusive, an opportunity to be the first to break the story. And if you've got something super newsworthy, and we will talk about what makes something newsworthy in a bit, that can be a good way to go by offering it out under exclusive. One thing that we're noticing right now is it takes more touch points than before to have your story picked up. So before we were maybe seeing 2 to 3 touch points with media, it's now about 4 to 5. Every now and then you'll have an opportunity where you've got something super newsworthy and you might not need as many touch points. But if it's a story that's evergreen, so something that's always, they could write about at any time, it may take a little bit longer for that to be picked up. Other things to think about in Canada in terms of how the news cycle works is if you're offering an exclusive to someone at Post Media, then someone who's part of CBC may not pick it up, right? All of these media groups have a bit of a different lens on the political spectrum of what they're covering from an editorial perspective. And there may be some that align more with the message you're trying to get out. So the biggest takeaway from this slide is everything is connected, and you want to make sure you're researching to see who's going to cover my story, where would it land. In BC, for example, if you're wanting to get the most bang for your buck from the opportunity of going for a broadcast hit, Global has the most viewership. So Global BC would be where you want to go, but you may say, I haven't had luck with Global, then you might want to go to CTV. These are all things you can look as you're building out your media relations plans or you're trying to get coverage. And you also want to look at where your stakeholders, right? They may not be in the mainstream media market. Maybe you're doing a big talent or recruitment campaign and you need to rely on trade publications like Van Tech Journal, TechCouver, BetaKit, etc., to publish that. So it really does depend. What's the story? Who's the audience? One thing that we talk about a lot is Tom at Switchboard, and Tom is kind of your best friend in communications because it's target, objective, and message. So target, who are you trying to talk to, or who are you talking to? What is your one objective, and what are 3 messages that can support? Now in the US, We don't have a slide for this, but it's a bit of a different story. Again, when we're pitching in the US, we're still seeing the touch points, probably 4 touch points. I think like most of us, as everyone's been working and at their computers a lot during the pandemic, and we're starting to emerge in this new normal, it's reporters are starting to meet in person with each other. There are starting to be media events again. This is all a good thing. Um, and really, a lot of what you're going to do for best practices for the Canadian media market will land in the US as well. You'll see more and more trade publications in the US, and that's a great way if you're looking for Canada and US coverage to start build your relationships with those trade publications. Here in Canada, here's some examples of trade publications that you may want to pitch, and we'll talk about how you can pitch trade publications. I just say this is really a general snapshot of tech. When we're pitching something, so for example, we pitched something recently where artificial intelligence was a key part of their business. There are tons of podcasts you can look at. Podcasts are always looking for content. You can pitch them. It's a great resource. I know during Vancouver Startup Week, I was on a panel and Greg Smith from Thinkific was saying he used podcasts and different opportunities to speak and to be sharing Thinkific's story in the early days as a tool to grow and scale and build some more mainstream coverage. And I think that some of his perspectives in that talk were really helpful, and it's on their website, but something that could be a good resource. Let's talk about what media wants. This is really important. Media are always looking for certain things. So media likes to have unusualness. So is there something unusual about this? Is it first of its kind? So if you had the first of its kind, COVID vaccine, you're going to get a lot of media around that. It's unusual, it's new, first of its kind, all really important. Media also like conflict, right? So good news isn't something necessarily that people are going to click on. If an airplane lands, successfully, none of us are talking about it. If there was a crash, we'd all be talking about it. Conflict always sells. So different opinions, something that's outside of the status quo, that's really helpful. Celebrity connections are huge. We just launched a pet cannabis company for pets with anxiety in the US market, and they had spokesperson that is a football player that's very well known. So that was a real hook, and we could leverage that. Forbes has a reporter that talks about celebrity investors. So celebrity connections can be a celebrity. It can also be different interest groups, right, that are kind of celebrities within the ecosystem. You could think about it that way. So maybe you have Jeanette Jackson from Foresight, right? If you're a clean tech company, putting a quote into your news release, that could be a connection. It could be government providing a connection. It could be an investor that has a lot of clout in the ecosystem offering a quote for something, but the celebrity connection can be a good way as well. The other thing, and I think now more than ever that's important, is human interest. People want those real life human interest stories. People want to start seeing things of people in person, heartfelt stories, things that aren't feeling so dark with what the coverage has been in the last little bit around COVID, businesses closing. So if you were to turn on the news or look through your Twitter feed for news in your local area, a lot of the human interest stories are getting play. It has to be topical. Look, go to the Vancouver Sun's main page, look on Twitter news, see everything that's out. Is your story topical? Is it going to land? This is important. Last week, if you were pitching with the Canada Day where it was, and most people taking that Friday off, and then the competing news cycles of like a climate crisis, mass heat wave, forest fires, it's going to be really hard to get mainstream media's attention. Okay, so you want to look at how topical is this and where does this work? Then you want to look at how original is it? And this again comes for first of its kind, if you can make that claim, or if it's something that they haven't covered before and you can lay the groundwork. Those are all things that media are looking for from a reporter perspective and an editorial perspective as well. So let's go through some examples. I won't play these clips for today, but you'll get this deck so you can look through them really at any time. These are some video clips, and what we're going to give you is you're going to get kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly of media relations. These are fun clips to watch on your own. This clip, just to summarize, if you're going back and watching it, it's really where a reporter asks questions that obviously the spokesperson doesn't want to get into, but doesn't just bridge away and move the conversation along. Instead, they kind of get into it. Of course, reporters love that, right? It makes for good TV. It's why the clip's included today. I won't play it for you.
Founder of Lululemon is getting a big honor. Chip Wilson is being inducted into the Business Laureates of BC Hall of Fame coming up next year. We are very excited to have him joining us in studio.
Of course, and
I'll get to the part
it's
where
really it's a culmination of a whole lifetime, and I couldn't be more honored, especially for BC.
For sure. And you know what? Lululemon is a big BC success story. You founded the company 20 years ago in 1998. What was your ambition for Lululemon when you started out?
It was to elevate the world from a place of mediocrity to greatness. And I was doing that through the development program that we had for the people. It was basically putting people's personal and family lives ahead of the business as a concept, and it ended up being phenomenal as a way of actually running a business.
Now, you know, people have grown accustomed to wearing Lululemon, but the company has been with some controversy as well. As you know, it was a few years ago that there were some comments made about the sheerness of the pants. This was back in 2013. You said the pants just don't work for some women's bodies. Obviously, you would have known that this was going to spark some reaction. Why did you say that?
Well, I think the only people that ask me that question are media that are trying to that pretend to be news but are actually in the sensationalism world in order to sell advertising, in order to to pay for the bills.
So you feel that was a sensational question from me?
Yes, certainly.
I'm asking you because
I also think that it's from people who lives aren't working for them, and they need to bring other people down in order to make themselves feel good.
It's a question that I'm asking because it's something I've heard from a lot of people, from the public, from people on Twitter that have said, I want to know why that statement was made. As a customer of Lululemon and as a woman, some people felt, I'm not speaking for myself and speaking for them, they felt offended by that. So I'm just giving you a chance to PM. Chip Wilson, thanks again for joining us.
My pleasure, Sonia.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
So there you get a good feel. Media availability was given, right? Sonia's going to push. She's going to ask the questions. You can bridge away and move on, but to really go when the reporter is giving it to you and to get the gotcha and keep going, it does spiral the interview. So I was just giving you a few of the clips. You can go back and watch that interview, no problem. I'm just going to try to skip through some of the other videos for you, just for the interest of time. There we go. You can go back. A lot of what these videos are going to show you is some of the good, some of the bad, and you'll even see some real spirals with reporters. So it can be fun to watch. It's always good to see what to do and not to do. I want to talk a little bit about your communications plan, really just the basics, to leave you with some tools today. So one of the things you want to do is you always want to have goals or KPIs, right? And you need to make sure you've got tools to measure them. So communications goals should tie in with your business goals, your business objectives. So that's really important. So if you're thinking through your communications plan, your goal could be, oh, we've got this upcoming media announcement. We want to make sure we pitch all media, 3 times before this big announcement that ties to one of your business goals. Maybe it's a raise in financing that you're wanting to share. You want to talk about your target audience, or you may call these folks your key stakeholders. This is who you need to reach to achieve your goals. It could be customers, it could be investors, it could be different groups within the ecosystem, it could be universities. Whoever your target audience is, you want to list them out. Sometimes target audience can be hard to nail down. One thing you can do with your team is you can do an audience exercise. So put all the audience on the board, give everyone a sticker or an opportunity to vote if you're doing it virtually, to pick, your top 3. And that can be a really good way to find some alignment on your audience. Again, you may have primary audiences that are of most importance and then secondary audiences. And you may find in different communications plans, when you're doing more granular ones, that your audience changes and shifts a bit. Key messaging is really important. What are you trying to communicate? That's really what a key message is. So what do you need to communicate and what are you trying to communicate? This can be your why. This can be why you exist. It could be You really need to communicate that you've got jobs open right now and it's a great place to work. Whatever your key messages are, this is important. You can test these key messages for what's landing. So you can do different subject lines. For example, if you're pitching media via email and you can A/B test them, there's lots of different things you can do to say, hey, is this messaging landing? So these are 3 components of your comms plan. Then moving into some other components, you want to think through what your strategies are and what your tactics are. So your plan to achieve these goals or your KPIs, what are you going to do? So it may be, hey, we're going to start talking to media. We're going to update our website. We're going to do blogs more regularly. We're going to prep to approach podcasts or speaking events. These are all your strategies and tactics. Obviously, you want to make sure you have a timeline. If you're not planning this out, it's probably not going to happen. You do a bit of a risk assessment when you're doing a comms plan, and this can be, a real quick and dirty one. Considerations and challenges. So what are the obstacles that could stand in your way here? It could be, it's a very cluttered news cycle, right? Here are other things that are in there. It may be, this is something we're doing off the side of our desk, so time. Then maybe you want to invest in a few quality media relationships over quantity, right? All of these things should be talked about, and you'll have your own considerations and challenges internally. Again, if you're doing a comms plan that's really specific for one thing, for example, let's say it's an announcement on a raise. Maybe you have one investor that has had some bad press before, you put that in as a consideration and challenge. Or maybe a consideration and challenge for you would be, hey, talent is big. We've got 34 open roles on our website, but we're saying we have no talent issues. We need to make sure we've got alignment in messaging there. So it's a really good opportunity to just identify what are some of the risks and what are some red flags. Those are kind of your core components of a comms plan. Some comms plans, get a lot more robust than that, but when you're thinking internally about planning out a corporate comms plan or a mini comms plan around an event or something that's exciting that you want to make sure you have all your ducks in a row on, those are some components that you should be sure to have. I think on the resource page of our website, if you go to switchboardpr.com, there's a resource page. There's a comms plan template designed for startups and companies that are growing and scaling that you could leverage to help build that out. Let's talk about being PR ready, okay? Because there's a lot of things that you can do early stages that are really easy, that are not going to cost you a lot of money to make sure you're PR ready. One of the first is making sure that you've got a media contact, okay? If you're proactively pitching media or saying, hey, I'd love some coverage, or I'd love for people to be talking about me, make sure that you are PR ready. And it starts with the contact. If it takes longer than 30 seconds for media to find your contact information on your website, it's too long. They've probably moved on. If, reporters are looking for things, they may say, oh, I found this random company that has, a place in their editorial coverage. I'm trying, here's a local biotech company. I'm doing a story about biotech generally. They've got a media contact. Great. You should have an email and you should have a phone number. I know phone number, some people are like, we hardly ever use our phone. When media are on tight deadlines, it's really helpful for them to not just have to go through email, but to also have a phone number. They can call and say, hey, we're doing this local biotech story. Do you want a spot or not? And you might have, your 30 seconds in the news cycle. Media kits are important, and it's really simple here. You are giving them some pre-packaged information about your company. So it could be kind of a cheat sheet that briefs them on your company so they don't have to read the entire website. I'd really stress for tech companies, plain language is important here. Different if you're pitching out trade publications who will probably get it and know the jargon. But for mainstream media, part of the problem on why, companies don't always get covered in mainstream media is it's so technical, right? And it works for tech trade publications. But if you're going to mainstream, really explain it all to them, give them definitions, give them resources and links in your media one pager that they can get to. You'll also want to make sure you're giving them some photos, some video within your media kit, things that they can leverage for their story. Again, just make it easy. Think of them like a customer or a client. You're wanting to make it as easy as possible. A media page is super important. Here's some examples. So like Etsy's media page. Some people put fast facts in. I think it's really neat if you're showing growth or you've got a story arc that you're working on, telling a certain story. It could be, started the year with 60 employees, closing the year with 100. Year that you were founded, any key stats, money raised to date, things like that. And you'll see that they've got contacts. These are all really important to have on your media page. Here's an example from Facebook in terms of how they're grouping out their news. Again, for most of you, you probably wouldn't have a ton of announcements that you need to group out your news, but this is a really nice example if you are grouping out news. Visual Ping has a great example of a media page on their website. So it's really quick to see who the contacts are. You can see kind of Visual Ping at a glance, right? What is it? That helps reporters, okay, I don't have to look on their about page and all these various pages to fact check some things. There we go. And then they've got their media coverage as well. So that's a great example. And they're a local Vancouver company. Clio, they've got a great media page to check out just in terms of how they organize things and how they break it down, okay? So lots of different ways you can do your media page. Really important to think, how do I make this easy for members of the media? A media one-pager, think of it as like your Coles notes. If you ever didn't want to read one of the books we would have all been assigned at points in life and you were reading the Coles Notes version. Think of your one pager as a nice Coles Notes summary, one page. Think of your media kit having everything they could possibly need in one place. You can do that. Google Drive, you could do it in a Dropbox folder. Obviously make sure it's updated regularly, have your logo in there, photos, video, all of those things. Let's talk about media training a little bit and what you want to look for in your spokesperson. And I think in the early days, it's really important to make sure that you're using a spokesperson that's going to be staying with the company. So sometimes that's the founder or the co-founder. It doesn't have to be those people if you've got someone that would be a better spokesperson internally. So you may say, hey, I'm going to make this person the spokesperson, but it's important that they're there for the long haul. You don't want to change spokespeople a ton. So it doesn't always have to be the, highest person on your executive team. And even as you're growing and scaling, you may start to introduce other spokespeople. That's important to think about. But you do want to make sure you've designated at least one spokesperson. That will help internally when you're getting media requests and for consistency within the voice as well. You want to make sure that your spokesperson has consistent messaging and Q&A documents that can support. So, before you're working, you might not have a comms person on your team yet. Maybe your marketing person and a few others might sit and workshop. What are some questions people may ask? And you can think of it as stakeholders, or you could think of it as media, and you want to make sure you've got your questions and answers ready. You may outsource for a PR company for media training, or you may role play in sessions that you can see that exist within the ecosystem like this one, right? So I'm always happy to practice with people what it looks like for the media. The biggest thing to take away when you're talking to a member of the media is it does get easier over time. And this is something else that Greg mentioned on that Vancouver Startup Week talk, was that the more he did it, the more comfortable he got. I often tell clients when we are media training, think of it a lot like skiing. The more time you're on the mountain, the better you get. The other thing that's important with media training is you want to do your research. So before you're talking to the reporter, if there's, podcast examples, watch one of them so you know their reporting style. Look at their Twitter feed for what they're talking about, maybe where their political views land. Do your research so you know a little bit about the person like you would if you were going into a sales meeting. And then you want to define your audience, know who you're talking to, and understand maybe the media sources that they've got, or do a pre-brief. If you're talking to mainstream media about something really technical and you do have a comms person on your team or a marketing person, it's sometimes a good idea to pre-brief the reporter and make sure that they've got a good understanding. So, what is a therapeutic antibody, for example, walking them through what that is if they've never heard of it, or if you're getting into like specifics around particles, and finding plain language examples. So if you said, hey, we save, if you're working with us, our solution saves 100 plastic bottles of water. Whatever it is, you want to ground some of that really technical jargon in something relatable and that media can visualize. So that's important for mainstream. There are some great tips and tactics that we're going to talk about today for media relations, and we can practice those if anyone wants to role play. I'm kind of giving you the warm up that we'll have some people join, and it'll be soft interviews, but we'll work on how you can practice interviews. So just from a tactical perspectives for media relations, here's some things you can think about. So if you're at the stage where you're starting to develop an outreach to reporters, here's some things that I'd encourage you to think about. So which reporters are writing in your space? And you could just set up a really simple Google alert with some of your keywords to say, hey, these are reporters that are talking about this. and start with an introduction. So, okay, this reporter talked about the climate crisis, and you've got, you're in the clean tech space and you're working on something that really addresses the climate crisis. You could approach that reporter and do an introduction to your company, who you are and what you do. I say now that it takes multiple touch points. So you want to leverage social as well, right? So maybe you're the founder of the company and you're connecting with that reporter on Twitter, or you're connecting with them on LinkedIn. Those things are really important to do. Follow on social media and engage with their content. Now more than ever, you can build these relationships online. You don't need to go be meeting in person for a cup of coffee or going for a beer, a glass of wine. You can follow on social and start, sharing some of their content, commenting on things. Have a strong B-roll library. There's something called A-roll. That's when like a camera is there and they're shooting your interview in person, and there's B-roll. It's what they're filling the story with. So if you think about global news, in the background, maybe they've got some students walking around for the return to school session. That would be the B-roll, stuff that they're using when the anchor or the reporter is talking, or the spokesperson's talking in the background. Maybe it's some B-roll of a lab. Make sure you've got a strong B-roll library. Sometimes in tech, it's hard to do this because you have proprietary information in a lab, for example, or you don't want to have folks seen who's working on your team. All of these things can be factors. There's ways to get around that, and I would make sure and encourage you all to have some photos and some video, so when the ask comes in, you're not losing that spot because there's nothing to accompany it. Stock doesn't really work here, and you can shoot even just from your iPhone. We've done that before where, in the past we were at a client event and City TV couldn't get a camera out there because it was out in Stanley Park. We just shot on our iPhone. That can work, and it's great because it gives them what they need to fill out and round out that story. You want to know when you have a story and when you don't, okay? And some of that goes to, is it unusual? That slide that talks about what media are looking for. So an example of this really was in like early days of COVID. Remember when all of the breweries were making hand sanitizers? If you were one of the first, you had a story there. But if you were pitching that out and you were the third or fourth one, it's not worth pitching. It's not going to land anymore. It was wasted energy, and you're just clogging up the reporter or the editor or the producer's inbox. Really important, just so that you all know, when you're talking to a member of the media, you can always say you don't know, and it's better to tell them if you don't know or you need to fact check something than trying to make something up off the cusp. So, we definitely are going this year to hit 250 employees. If that's not a number that you validated internally, don't use it. You can always say, hey, I'm not positive. I want to make sure I give you the exact number. Can I circle back with you? What's your deadline? I'll get this for you by end of day. All of those things work better than saying that you don't know. So that's important. Let's talk a little bit about knowing your media materials. There is some jargon here. I'll walk you through what all of these different things are so that you know. So you've got a boilerplate. A boilerplate is your paragraph, right? It's something that you'll see in news releases. Everyone's got their boilerplate. This is really important. It's going to have your why, what's inspiring about this company, what you do, and it's a great summary. So if media are looking at your news release, they may just read the boilerplate and say, okay, cool, this is what they do. It's something that's interesting. There's also press releases, right? So those are announcements. Sometimes people put those out on the wire. Sometimes you don't need to. It's living on your website. It's being distributed via pitching, all of those things. Then there's media advisories. Governments do these a ton. That's showing media availability or a media event. There's media backgrounders, which we talked about a bit. So that's that one pager. It's giving them background, and maybe you're launching a survey or a white paper and it's 100 pages long. You're going to want to make sure you've got a media one pager on what's in there. And then you've got your B-roll library. So just reinforcing that these media materials are really important. In this deck, you can find some examples. So here's the New Ventures BC boilerplate. Easy to understand who they are, what they do, why they exist. And it's important that that remains consistent. Press releases, again, here's an example. Just in terms of drafting your press release, we'll go through this a bit. I know many of you are drafting these. So you want to make sure your press release title is short. And sometimes you'll have a primary title for a press release and then a subtitle, which is fine. Again, determine what your story is and if you need to do that. Use your company logo and colors throughout your press release. make sure that your headline does include your keywords. If you're putting this out on the wire and you're using the wire as a tactic to help with SEO and kind of aggregator in general, you should make sure you've got a summary paragraph. So that's got your city, the day that this is being distributed, all of those things. You want to make sure you get out your W's, right? So the who, what, why, where, when, and then how, if that's needed as well. You'll have a body of your press release that's walking through things. You want to make sure you've got a really compelling last paragraph. Sometimes thinking reporters are time crunched, right? They're going to skim headline, first paragraph, last paragraph, boilerplate. When you can include validator quotes, that's really helpful. And anything that you can have from contact information for who your media contact is. Now, if it's yourself as a founder, I would just use media ad or press ad and then your company name. That can be really helpful. Here's an example of a media advisory. Again, like I mentioned, these are much more around events, media availability. Government does these a lot, and there's an example for you. This could be something that you're doing if maybe you're breaking ground on a facility or you're opening something up. Again, as we start to reopen, guided obviously by public safety measures, you may see more media advisories popping up. Again, you want to make sure everything's included there. Media advisories generally go out in advance of the event. So think like 2 weeks out. And that's really helping newsrooms and teams schedule things, right? So that's a good way to look at it. It is important to know the difference between a press release and a media advisory. This mattered more when in-person events were happening, because sometimes tech companies would open up and say, hey, come to our office, or we're doing a lab tour, or we're doing this. That's not really a press release. That's much more of a media advisory. So the takeaway there is to just make sure you know the difference and you know which one you're wanting to leverage. In terms of knowing your media material, here's an example from the BC Tech Summit of a media backgrounder, right? It's your Coles Notes, what you need to know. So think about that. It's your fast facts, all of it in a one-pager that you can give to media. When you are pitching or you've secured an interview, it can be helpful to provide the reporter in advance. And for reference, attached is our media backgrounder. It's less work for the reporter than to find all of the information that they may need. Just an example, we've talked about a B-roll library, right? Here's an example for you of what you can include. So you've got your logo, you've got the photos from an event, maybe if you're pitching around an event with a post pitch, photos from members, you've got videos, all of this. Again, you'll want to label it. You want to keep it well organized, show them who the source should be for videos and photos. You can even draft a caption and save them with a caption, or in media, we call it a cut line that they're going to be using when they repurpose the photo. All of that is important. So let's say you've done your comms plan, you've been doing media relations, all the things that we've talked about today, and now you've got an interview. We're going to talk about what's next when you've got this interview. So obviously you can media train and you can leverage that as an opportunity. And in that, you'll want to do all of these things. So gather that information like we talked about before on the reporter. Gather background information on the publication. That's also important. You can go sometimes to the publications and get their electronic media kits. Find out what their readership is. What does that look like? Have your boilerplate ready. And what I always like to tell people is to write out your TOM. So that's your target, objective, and message. And you'll notice in comms, we come back to things a few times. So a big takeaway today is TOM as a tool can be used for a media interview. It can be used for a sales meeting. It could be used for a meeting with government. It's a great little tool to just ground yourself before things. So I like to tell clients before you're going into an interview, let's say you're talking to Josh Scott at BetaKit. Maybe you're writing down Josh at the top of your paper if it's kind of an impromptu one, and KT, that's my target. And then I'd write down what my target is. What's my objective? What am I trying to achieve from this? I really need to tell people that this is a great place to work and, we're hiring. And then what are your 3 messages? And I keep it to 3 to support that. You can't really take in much more than that. At the end of the day, prep is vital, okay? So if you know the interviewer, put their name on your briefs, make sure you're thanking them. That's really helpful. Understand who your end audience is and who you're talking to. If you're talking to Global BC and you're getting into particles and very scientific things that your average person would not understand, take a step back and think, how would I explain this to my 10-year-old, or how would I explain this to my grandma? It's always okay in an interview to clarify or ask for questions. And you can sometimes ask for questions ahead of the interview. So you can say, hey, what are the themes or what are some potential questions? If it's your first interview too, tell the reporter that, right? Let them know, because they'll be a little bit easier on you in that scenario. Avoid that jargon as best as you can, unless it's trade publication. And if it's just someone who covers tech generally and you're getting really, really specific about ag tech, for example, you still need to know, okay, they're just a tech reporter. I mean, they do know tech, maybe they're going to get this, but make sure you're walking through some of the terms you may be using. Think in sound bites, so that's important. Obviously, we're not getting into everything today, but there's different types of interviews. So for podcasts, there's a nice sound bite length. Generally, think of a 30-second answer. One exercise that I'll do with clients is say, hey, record your answer and then transcribe it. When you're transcribing your answer, especially if you run long, you'll be able to say, oh, I could probably cut this part and this part and this part. And what you'll take away is a golden nugget. Okay. That's what I like to remind clients of. What's really your golden nugget there? There will be awkward silences in an interview. That's really important to note. The reporter does have to, find their time for their next question. And sometimes that power of a pause can be really helpful for you as a spokesperson. It offers a bit of a reset. Other thing to know is this is a two-way relationship. Okay. The media need you as much as you need the media. In terms of answers, they're organized, right? Body language and the use of hands. I talk with my hands a lot. So sometimes if I am doing an interview, I'll sit on them. Swivel chairs, I'm in one today, not great for a podcast interview, because if you're nervous or if you're just someone who's maybe more prone to move, you may start swiveling. So I always tell people to use a stationary chair or a stool when they're doing interviews. Your clothing and appearance is important. So jangly earrings, things like that can be a bit distracting. Sometimes they're hitting, if you're mic'd up, they could be hitting the mic. Eye contact is obviously really important. We talk about giving you an anchor point when a big camera is in front of you. So the anchor point is behind. That could be someone on your team standing there. More and more, it's just camera operators coming to do those in person. Sometimes what we tell people to do when they're doing a podcast interview is right at their webcam to put a little smiley face or photo of their dog or a kid, something that will ground them to look at the camera when they're in that interview, because you're in the interview, right? Tone, information, timing, and pace are important. I'm pretty quick, so I might speed up in an interview if I was nervous. Those are things that you want to be aware of as a spokesperson. Some reporters have a really quick pace, and that's a way to throw a lot of information your way to see what you're going to jump on. You've got the power there, and it's really important that you slow down if you need to keep your messaging and to keep your pace. Posture and projection are key. So when you're in a swivel chair, you're also more prone to slouch. So make sure, shoulders are back, you're projecting, important for radio interviews as well. Answer length, we talked about that a little bit with sound bites, and just breathe. You've got this, and practice, practice, practice. There's tons of different interview types. I know I'm mindful of time, so we won't go through all of the interview types today, because I want to make sure if anyone does have their 60-minute hard stop, that they can practice some media training scenarios. These are a bunch of the interview scenarios that we're seeing right now, as well as the COVID protocols. We've talked about Tom, so this is your opportunity to think about who you are as an organization and who are your stakeholders. So these are some examples, right? Is it your employees? Is it sponsors? Is it media? Is it the federal government? Is it the municipal government? You can kind of map out your audience this way. And again, you could do that sticker exercise or the voting exercise to find your primary and secondary. And then Tom as a tool is a really helpful technique. So we do have a little Tom technique prepped here today. If anyone is wanting to practice, we can do it based on your company. But what this is this is just an example of how we would use Tom. So here's an example that is with William Johnson from Van Tech Journal. So a great reporter in our ecosystem here. So let's say you were asked to do a phone interview with Will, and he's talking about PR training. Some of the sample questions would be, what is the goal of PR training? Can you explain two perspectives of working? Not sure what that one would be related to, but can you explain how these perspectives would be useful maybe for you as in the New Ventures BC community? So you could leverage your training to elevate how New Ventures BC helped you. So these are all examples where you could pull in the Tom technique, and that would help you throughout. So I want to make sure that we've got some time to do on the spot media relations. Your takeaways here are media relations. They're stories, they're not ads. If you're saying, hey, I've launched this new product, that's more of an ad, okay? You want to make sure you're building these relationships with reporters over time. If you're looking for media coverage, make sure you're PR ready, okay? We talked about media kit, media contact, media page, all super helpful. Media training, make sure you've got a spokesperson. You can hire a professional to practice some of that messaging. You can practice internally by recording yourself, writing out what your answers are to find that golden nugget that we talked about. And social media, making sure that you are connecting with reporters and that you've got some consistency there as well. That's going to be important. Resources that we've got for you is there's an infographic on media relations. And again, you'll get this deck, so you can click all of these links. And there's also the public relations checklist for startups. So what do you need to make sure you have ready to make sure you're ready to go? So that is really all things PR related, really quick for you. It's a bit of information overload. And if anyone would want to, we facilitate media training all the time for lots of spokespeople in the ecosystem. I'm happy to practice. In order to practice here, what's good to know is who kind of wants to go. You'll give me a quick spiel of what your company is and what you do and maybe what you're looking for media on. I'll think of a reporter or publication and I'll role play them, and we'll ask you 3 questions and then kind of workshop it on the spot. So I know this can be a nerve-wracking portion, but if anyone wants to media train on the spot, we've held some time for that. So I will stop sharing my screen so that we can all see each other, and happy to media train on the spot here if anyone's interested. I promise we're really nice in the first ones. We're not hitting you with hard questions. It's not an ambush style interview.
So if you are interested, maybe put up your hand with the Zoom hand, or you can put a note in the chat, either of those. And you don't often get a PR pro giving you feedback, so I highly recommend you give it a go. I see Clark.
I love doing it. I see that there's questions in the chat, and maybe to give you guys a little bit of time, if no one's quite ready, I'm happy to talk about that.
Right. Oh, we do have one volunteer.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. Sometimes
Clark.
People need a little time. Who's going?
I can't resist the opportunity.
I'm excited. Can you tell me a little bit about who you are, what your company does, and then we can talk about the scenario.
Okay, I'm Clark from Cortico Health Technologies, and we're a patient engagement platform. And I guess our key differentiator is most of the existing incumbent patient engagement platforms patients don't use them very much. They're typically in the single digits of usage from what we've seen, which is crazy, we thought. So when we realized that we kind of built this one off already, we decided to turn it into a joint venture with that clinic, and we're able to get often 100% engagement, every single patient of theirs into the platform using it.
Okay, nice. So Clark, is there a media, like a dream media hit or somewhere you'd really like to see your company?
Well, it's very, I guess industry niche specific. It's clinic managers are our customers. So I guess medical newsletters. There's a number of those for doctors, but I've actually never seen really a trade magazine for clinic managers, and I haven't really researched it either. So that would kind of be something. Right now I feel silly for not having maybe researched that, but
don't feel silly.
If it existed.
I think another way to think about this are that patients can demand certain things, right, from their clinics, or may suggest things. So for you, I think mainstream media would make sense to work to go through. And clinic managers, when you think about probably the personality and who they are, a lot of them are probably watching, I'd imagine, some of the mainstream news or listening to CBC. So we could do a scenario where I'll be Stephen Quinn from CBC radio, and we could ask some general questions, and we can just practice how you would answer those for today. And then again, happy to chat through maybe what that looks like. I also haven't seen publications to that specific market before, so don't worry about not seeing those. So what I'm going to ask you is, it's just going to be, you've called into the studio and you're live on air. So there's something where you're live sometimes, or there can be a pre-record interview, right? We didn't even get into this today. A pre-record means that they're going to cut it. They're taking your interview. You get a mulligan, you get a throwaway. Hey, I didn't really nail that answer. Could I do another one? We're going to say that this is live. And then if you're okay with that, we'll workshop some of the feedback, Clark, and we'll obviously keep it all really positive. Don't worry if you don't give the perfect answer. It's not the end of the world. So you just call in and then I'll greet you.
Hi there, can I speak to Steve?
Yes, Stephen speaking. Clark, exciting today. I hear you've got something that's going to help patients in the medical system. Can you walk me through who you are and what you do?
So my name's Clark, and I was from the software agency space, building software in different industries. And I noticed that in healthcare that they're really underserved, and a lot of the software doesn't really do what it's set out to do. And so I kind of felt a bit of a calling and got involved in that industry.
Right, and Clark, what's the name of the company?
It's Cortico Health Technologies.
Great. And you saw a need in the market. Walk me through why does this matter, and what is important for this for patients?
Yeah, so my first contact with this problem was I personally knew a clinic owner and manager that their clinic was getting about 800 phone calls a day at a 20-doctor clinic, and they were really overwhelmed. The owner was overwhelmed with the administrative cost of that, with kind of wages rising. The people that worked there, it was their least favorite part of their job. So they were kind of overwhelmed just by the volume of calls, and patients don't like sitting on hold. So really this situation wasn't good for anyone involved in the transaction. Mm-hmm. And the owner knew the solution. He wanted to go to online booking so that patients could just go and pick an open spot in the doctor's schedule and be on their way. And then they can easily kind of come back and cancel it or move it. And they don't need to be, waiting 10 minutes to get on the phone with someone just to do that simple thing. So I said, so why are you bringing this to me? It sounds like you just need to go and buy the software. It's 2015. I'm sure something has existed for 15 years. Mm-hmm. But when I helped them look, that wasn't the case. We went and looked at a few products and patients wouldn't use them. And it was pretty clear why they had some usability problems. So we built our own.
Walk me through how this all works. You built the system. Walk me through, how does this work? If there's clinic managers listening today or patients that are sick of being on hold, how does this work?
Right. So if you call one of the clinics that has Cortico installed, their voicemail is going to start off saying, guess what? We have online booking now. You don't have to wait on hold. You can go to our website, which is www.myclinic.com, click book now, and you can book in 30 seconds instead of waiting for 10 minutes here.
And Clark, I've got to ask, Clark, it sounds like it works pretty seamlessly. Everything goes in. Did you see a big uptake during COVID?
Clinics that they wanted this and started the joint venture, and then it's kind of crickets, and we had a few sign up, but there was a disparity between what they said they wanted and the actual response from the market. But then as soon as COVID hit, we had 10 clinics lining up to have the product, and we absolutely pivoted and started working on it full out at that point.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me, Clark. Is there anything you want to add for listeners?
Oh, that's a tough one I wasn't prepared for. I'll just leave it at that.
Perfect. So media in most interviews are going to ask, is there anything you want to add? Is there anything else I should know? So that's a really great opportunity to advance your golden nugget, whatever it is. Hey, if you're a clinic manager, you're sick of waiting on hold for your clinic, make sure you tell them that, I exist, whatever your message is, whatever you want to advance. That's usually where you would advance your one objective that you're going into your interview with. Now, as you get more skilled, I've seen spokespeople who are sitting there and they're like, check, check, check. I hit this message. I didn't like my answer there. I'm going to go back to this message. But you always generally get that question in an interview. Is there anything you want to add? Is there anything I've missed asking you? Just generally, Clark, some feedback.
Okay, I'll have it for next time.
Yeah, no worries. And you did a great job, right? Like this is all just
Thanks so much.
Practicing. I'll give you a little bit more feedback that I wrote down as we went through. So making sure you're talking to CBC, it's mainstream media, right? So you want to paint the narrative for someone listening in their car, listening in their kitchen. Have you ever waited on hold, right? You want to create that imagery with your answer. So Stephen, as I'm sure you know, it's annoying to wait on hold, right? You can leverage all of that in your storytelling, in your answers, but you did a great job. Always important to be ready for that one. And you may want to get into it a little bit quicker. So the backstory on the why, that will come up further in your interview. And you don't need to tell them really where you were before. Focus on really the present, what you've got, and what you're there to talk about. But you did a great job, Clark. That's just some general feedback for you.
Great job, Clark. I too did not have an answer for that last question, my first interview, and you learn quickly to have an answer. So
You do.
you do.
Clark,
So it is
great job going first.
yeah, great job. It's 2:00. So for those who have to go, because I think I made a mix up on the time. So a lot of you are expecting to leave at 2. So thank you for joining us. We're redoing this webinar next week. So if you have if you know anyone who might benefit, feel free to, invite them to sign up on our website. But just, thank you to Kathleen. And if you have to leave, have a great day. Otherwise, if, a couple more people have questions, or I think Kathleen's willing to do a couple more of those examples, you can, we'll stick around here.
Yeah, happy to do more examples. And Angie, it may have been our team mixed up the time, so I don't know. No worries there. But if anyone wants to practice, I know there are some questions in chat too, but again, I love helping people out with thinking through their interview scenarios. So happy to jump in if people want to do the training.
Greg's asking if there are any podcasts that you can recommend.
Canadian Public Relations Society has resources. Are you wanting podcasts for hitting up for your company to pitch? Greg?
Yeah, feel free to type Greg or unmute.
Yeah, type or unmute.
Hi, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. No, not particular, but we're in Vancouver, and hi. And we've been interviewed before and on the radio, and it went over really, really well. Our company, our radio station up in Kelowna just interviewed us, and it was great. And we had lots of media attention that way. But then COVID hit, and now we can't return to those media outlets anymore because we've already told our story. So it's been there, done that kind of a thing. So
right.
I think the podcast would be a great way to reach out and just get our story out again now that COVID's come and gone.
And Greg, walk me through what it is that you guys do.
So we're a peer-to-peer trunk sharing platform, and we're new. There's no one else really doing it. We're just trying to get the word out about Trunk It Now, and we're trying to use media, digital media and traditional media to get the word out, because we need to have thousands and thousands of users that are signed up and posting their trips and posting their items for delivery in order for it to work. So it's really just about exposure and in certain markets. So a podcast would be great because people are driving and listening to a podcast and then learning about Trunk It. So it's a way for the people to offset the cost of their travel.
Absolutely. Greg, that's really neat. I think some of the things you can look at is there are travel podcasts that exist, right? There are tourism boards that run podcasts, for example. There are different avenues you could explore. So I'd almost look at like, who could listen to this? Talk radio, they do always have to fill the airwaves, right? And what are some editorial dates in a calendar? Like, is there the BC Day long weekend is coming up? You could pitch around that, right? Like, look at things that you know they're going to be talking about anyway for talk radio that you can grab onto. Specific podcasts aren't coming to mind for me, like in that market right now. I'm sure there are a bunch in travel. I don't do a lot of travel PR, so I wouldn't know those podcasts, but you could look for someone who does and pick their brain or engage with them on pitching some of the travel podcasts. There's tons of influencers you could leverage, right, that are traveling. There are some tech influencers in this space. From a podcast perspective, BetaKit does a podcast, right? So, it's summer, we're in our cars, we're driving places, things are starting to reopen. You could use that reopening narrative. It's different in each province and territory. All of those things are important. If you're powered by AI, for example, there's a bunch of AI podcasts, but those are all things to think about as you're looking and you're building out your media list and who to pitch. And we didn't get into this, but like editorial dates, right, that we all look at for social media or things that are happening are good ways to leverage it and to make your pitch timely.
Great.
And you can also go back to the radio, right? Now COVID's over, things are reopening. We know folks are coming into the beautiful Okanagan and to Kelowna, and we'd love to chat again. Don't be scared to go back, okay? All they can say is no.
You're right. Thank you for that.
No problem, Greg. Awesome question.
Thank you.
All right.
Does anyone else want to try?
Anyone else? I feel it's, I don't know, is it more stressful or less stressful over Zoom? Or what are people finding? I think Zoom is easier, in my opinion. So,
In person scarier, I think. I
Yeah.
just did Tuesday was all media training. It's all my colleague and I did all day. So
Oh, we have a volunteer.
oh,
Hello.
yay. Fun.
Is it Jabir? Is that how we say your name?
Indeed it is.
Awesome.
Kathleen, first, great presentation. Took a ton away from that. So
Oh,
thanks
good.
for making the time. And Angie, thanks for putting this on for us.
All right,
Um, Jabir, can you tell me a little bit about your company to create the narrative?
Yeah. So my company is Cared Upon. So caredupon.ca is our website. So really simply, we're a TripAdvisor for retirement care. So think like home care agencies, the nurse next doors of the world, assisted living, independent living, all the way up to long-term care.
Okay. And is there anything you're really working to accomplish right now with media? Is there a dream hit that you have or an audience that you're really trying to nail down?
Yeah, for us, it's general public at the moment. This is driving awareness about who we are and what we're doing. It's something new for the sector. People aren't necessarily used to looking for reviews like this. In fact, there hasn't even been kind of a national database or listing of these are all the service providers I can go to. So we're kind of first to market with that. And so with just having launched in April, for us, it's getting the word out, getting people to leave reviews on the platform, getting people to really engage with it. That's what our biggest challenge is right now.
Okay, that's really neat. I think there's a couple ways we could do it, and obviously some ideas for you. One would be to look at days, right? Like if there's a seniors day or, leveraging things like Mother's and Father's Day. You don't want to think about these things now, but it will approach. Use the editorial calendar for when you're pitching. And another thing I would do is set up a Google alert, because we all know care homes have been in the news a ton during COVID, right? So leverage that, and folks who were maybe talking about negative care homes or following that dialogue, they'd all be worth you pitching and starting to follow on social media. So let's just do, for the interest of this media interview, that Global News is doing a story. One of their producers or assignment editors is going to call you, and it's going to be pre-record. Okay, so for this one, it's pre-record scenario, a little less pressure than we gave Clark. It's not live. So if you really hate one of your answers, it's an opportunity to say, hey, can I redo that answer? So you've emailed with them, they've called, they've set up the interview. So I'm just going to call you and I'm going to ask you a couple of questions like it would be in an interview. Usually for a phone interview like this, they're going to record it, and maybe they're doing it for an online story. Okay, they're going to pull your quotes together. The journalist or the reporter you're talking to will say, hey, I'm going to record this. So we'll just role play that way and go from there. So ring, ring, ring.
Hello, Jabber speaking.
Hi, Jabir. I am Ashley calling from Global, and one of my assignment editors said that you were interested in talking to us about a company that you just launched. Can you quickly tell me who you are and just give me your name and spell it for me, your title at the company and the company name?
Sure. So my name is Jabir Nathu. So it's Jabir. So that's B for Bob. Last name is Nathu, N for Norman, Athu. And I'm the founder and CEO at Cared Upon.
Cared Upon. And I just want to make sure I've got that spelled correctly. So cared and then upon and capital U?
That's correct.
Perfect. Okay. And can you tell me, what is Cared Upon?
Cared Upon is a one-stop resource for seniors or their family members or their loved ones who are trying to support them to find the right retirement care solution for themselves. So this might be a personal support worker coming at home or a long-term care home or anything in between. So what we really do is we just reduce the anxiety that they face as they're kind of going through this really difficult life decision.
Perfect. And why did you start this company?
Well, over the course of the last 15 years, I've worked in retirement care, and I've connected with hundreds of older people and their families as they've been looking for retirement care solutions. And the overwhelming feeling is one of anxiety. They don't know what options they have. They don't know what it costs, who pays for it. They also don't know what local service providers can really help them as they grow older. And we wanted to address this issue and really kind of be a positive contributor to kind of our local healthcare ecosystem.
Perfect. And how many users do you have? And is this Canada-wide?
It is Canada-wide, coast to coast. We launched the platform on the 1st of April. We've got over 2,000 people every single month coming onto our platform looking for care, which is fantastic considering we've just been out there for such a short period of time. And we can only see this number kind of going up exponentially as more and more people come to know about Cared Upon and how it can help them.
Okay, and how do folks join and get involved with this? What are the action items that our audience can take away here?
Really, really simply, it's really come onto the website, www.caredupon.ca. It's really, really easy to navigate. So if you're just starting out, you can learn about your different care options, what might be right for you. If you know you're looking for, say, an independent living residence or an assisted living residence, you can really easily search on the platform and you can pretty much put the type of care you're looking for, the community you want to live in, and you'll get the most comprehensive listing of all the care providers around. You'll be able to see who they are, what they do, and also read what other kind of people who've used those services, what their lived experience has been.
That's great. And is there anything you'd want to add here?
What I'd want to add is, this platform will be more and more useful to more and more people the more we engage with it. So this is not just for people who are looking for care, but if you used care or if you know someone who's used care in the past, what I'd really request and what we'd love is for you to come on the platform and share your experiences. So people who are looking for care in the future, they don't have to have the same types of challenges that they did.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much. I think I've got what I need. If I've got any follow-up questions, is email the best way to get a hold of you?
It is indeed. And my email is jaber@caredupon.ca.
Perfect. So just for the sake of those that were listening or watching, oftentimes when you are doing an interview, they will have you give them your title, your name, spell everything out, because they want to make sure that when they're quoting you, it's specific, right? So if it's a pitch that's been forwarded or they've been given the story, they'll ask for email follow-up. I didn't tell you I was recording, but a reporter would do that. Generally you did a great job. What I would do is if you were transcribing your answers, they're a bit long. I think you could give a bit more of a punch. And really, everyone can think about the feeling of anxiety. So that's a great human interest narrative. So you're going to want to decide when you're doing your interviews, is it to talk about the anxiety and that feeling and paint that picture, right? So if you've got a loved one, you could even talk about and really draw upon human interest to get people involved and motivated to go to the website and start filling in reviews. I do see a little bit of a risk for you of saying, we need to get users because the reporter might go, well, are there not enough users? Like, how is this even helpful? Why do I want to be the first one? And you could answer that and you could frame all of your answers there, but just something to be aware of. I think for, a nice piece with global, they're not going to go there, but some media might. And then anything you want to add, that was great. And making sure you kind of have walked them through quickly and how easy it is to use. You could even say it takes, X number of minutes. It's as long as when you stand in a line for your cup of coffee, you could do this, right? It's all laying those groundworks to make it, I could do this. This is easy. All of those things, but you did a great job. So that's just some really high level feedback for you.
Thanks, Kathleen.
Yeah, no problem. I know that I've got 15 more minutes held. So if anyone wants to, I think Stan's looking for your email. So you can put it in the chat there. I know there were some questions. Angie, do you have questions that you want me to answer? I'm just kind of scrolling through the chat here.
I was just looking through the chat. I think you've addressed most of them already. Template for the media kit. You kind of had a bit of a checklist on your PowerPoint later on. That's like the press release and the B-roll, etc.
And if you go to our website, everyone, switchboardpair.com, there's lots of resources on the resource page.
Okay. That's good. Although I see many well-spoken people still here.
It's good. Well, if anyone wants
they want to practice. I pretty much know all of you who are still here. I know you're all pretty well-spoken. You can do it.
Maybe that means I can start playing a bit more real reporter and go a little harder. No, I promise I'd keep it nice, but we can practice if you'd like to practice scenarios or ask a question or receive specific counsel for something that you're trying to achieve on the PR front for your business right now.
Okay, cool. No, it looks like we're good. I think we're good to give you 15 minutes back, Kathleen.
Awesome.
But thank you. That was great. I think a lot of the I find the why part is the most important. So it was great that you were able to cover that off and how it really does connect to all the other aspects, more the business side of the business as well, around credibility. So no, I thought it was a great overview, and I'm looking forward to those examples.